All right, guys, welcome to my podcast. Today, I'm doing something different. I actually decided to reach out to a family member. So this is going to be interesting. I have my older brother, Daryl, here. I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Yeah, my name's Daryl Parker, naturally, and my brother has had this podcast for some time. Been following him. Really like the material. I'm honored to be here as a guest on your podcast, and really looking forward to having some conversation and helping talk about whatever it is that you'd be interested in talking about today.
Great. So I'm just going to start with the fact that I talk enough about myself. Anyone that listens to my podcast probably knows some in-depth details about things you didn't want to hear, or either things that are just like, random facts about me. So I just want to give you a chance to kind of like speak about yourself, introduce yourself in any way, like something about you, whether it's your favorite hobbies or, career-wise, even if you don't want to speak about that.
Yeah. So career-wise is, a really small figment of who I am as an individual, probably actually around 2%. So I do help manage quality for a large financial institution. But ultimately, I really enjoy spending time with my children. I enjoy learning the small idiosyncrasies about childhood, about the development, and how that still exists to this day from a psychological standpoint. So I've been studying psychology and some quantum mechanics for over a decade now. I'm an autodidact, so that there's no formal schooling in that. It's more of any article or YouTube video that I can get my hands on, science journals and the like, and then using that data to go back and question myself. I'm never at war with the world. I always use the analogy that I'm at war with myself, even though that's a peaceful war and there's no turmoil or destruction going on in there. The only thing that really gets destroyed is the old version of myself, in lieu of me creating a better version of myself by finding additional data points out in the field and then being able to test my own beliefs and hypotheses with that, and then validating that experiment afterward to determine if it was appropriate, potentially retesting it again or adding additional variables, and then making a determination so that whatever's on the other side of that equal sign is exactly what I decided it should be, but also, of course, understanding more things holistically.
Okay, well that sums up the fact that he's just a genius. Okay, I don't write these things. He's a little bit more in depth about self-awareness and what everything he just said. So I think I had a bunch of different topics that I wanted to talk about, but I think we should start from not the very beginning, but just like our childhood,
Yep.
what it was like growing up with 6 brothers and sisters in a 3-bedroom house. And just our mom and dad being very spiritual and religious in general. And then we can dive into other things if you want. But just kind of growing up, being young, what molded you and put you on might believe is the path where you are today.
Yeah, so I think that's a very interesting concept. And my belief or the perceptional lens that I view our childhood with has changed drastically over the last 15, 20 years. It's probably changed 5 or 6 times, and I have no doubt that the more things that I learned growing up in my own life, that I will probably change that thought process again. But coming from a family, we were probably more on the poor side for quite some time after Dad got sick, but I think that we never really knew about it because there was this richness of love. Right? So all of our aunts and uncles were super hospitable. For the most part, everyone got along. The parts of our family that our parents introduced us to. Yeah. I do remember Mom making a comment because we never saw them argue. I till this day still have never seen an argument between them or a disagreement, let alone.
True. I say that all the time and people don't believe me. They're like, what?
100% true. I will 100% attest to that. Absolutely. 100% true. Never seen them disagree before. But ultimately, what they did was I found out when I asked them about it, they actually made the decision early on in their marriage that they would never have a disagreement or raise their voice or fuss in front of their children. Mm-hmm. And that was something that Mom kind of experienced growing up a little bit. So the idea that they made that decision early on. A lot of people are like, oh, this relationship's perfect or this relationship is good. Why is it good? And it's not some magical elixir that occurred. It's that some people have made rules and guidelines like to build a foundation around, and then they operate within those guidelines.
Wow, and that's actually true. Growing up, like you said, we never saw mom and dad argue. And my mom, I always say this to some of my friends and be like, my mom is like, my mom and dad, and I'm not boasting or trying to build them up as to being like these pure beings or people, or like the symbol of humanity. But my mom and dad were just always caring, loving people, and they would give whatever to other people. And I think us growing up watching our parents be so selfless and caring and loving and never truly like, they made jokes. And my dad always made a way to just make us laugh. And it was just crazy. So I think we grew up seeing that, and I always say it's the Disney Channel effect, right? Like, it's like when you watch a Disney Channel movie and everything just lines up so perfect, and they don't show you, like, the movie ends and you just assume they live happily ever after.
Right.
Well, I can say that I felt like I lived in a scenario where my mom and dad were just so perfect and so great together that, like, it kind of messed with my mind, because when I started dating, I was just like, everybody's just love and, communicates easily and don't fight. And then when I got in the first relationship and I was manipulated emotionally, and then I realized it was manipulation, I was like, dang.
People really doing this?
Yeah, like, this is real. Like, this is not just, like, growing up
tough.
and experiencing it in your own household is easy to just be like, your parents are your role models. And I feel like our parents was just so perfect on so many levels.
Yeah.
That when it came time for us to like go out in the world and pursue our own like happiness, we looked to them as the model or the foundation for what we wanted. And when I ran into bumps, because I'm going to speak for myself, when I ran into bumps in relationships, I didn't know how to necessarily maneuver around manipulation or like someone being jealous, because like I never saw that with my mom and dad. Most I saw my mom and dad do, most I ever seen my parents get jealous was one of my dad's best friends, Chesapeake, came to our house one day and he made a joke about getting with my mom or touching her. And then it was just a joke. And my dad chased them down our dead end road, and then like with a knife, and then he like stabbed the ground, and we thought he killed him. And we were just like, oh my God.
That was a traumatic experience.
Yeah, it was.
Even though it wasn't real and it was, planned and there was laughter the entire time, that, because of all the emotions that get pulled up inside of us, it sears that image into our head. And that's why, because of those emotions, that's why we're so tied to memories. That specific memory we're tied to. Just like people who dealt with their parents in the household potentially fussing or being physically abusive. Any of those things, the emotions that are so strong in those moments are what tie us to those memories. And I've actually learned recently that we can go back and we can reduce the effects of those traumatic memories by changing the emotions and our perception of what we saw at those moments. And now I'm no therapist or psychologist by any means, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of the science would point back towards, in those conversations that people were having with their therapist, that they're suggesting that the memory is different than how they perceived it, or it potentially could have been.
I agree. I think when I look back on memories, like the craziest thing about our parents is like my dad worked a lot. Like when we were younger, before he got sick, he worked at the shipyard. He was gone long periods of time. But like all I remember, like I never remember him being absent. Like I remember him being present, and I don't know if it's because in between the time he got sick and the age I was maturing in my mind and my memory, how my memory was building. I just remember like memories I remember with dad is just like us wrestling with him in the living room. Us watching wrestling, him allowing us to watch Jeepers Creep. What's the skinny guy who was like Tales of the Crypt?
Tales of the Crypt, yeah.
Like him letting us watch that when Mama would say
that was
no.
a nice Cinemax late night or HBO. I can't remember which one.
I remember all of those memories of just like good memories, and I think it's also how your brain is wired. Because some people remember just a bunch of negative moments, but for me, I just look back on my life and I just think, man, I have a lot of great memories, a lot of great moments. I mean, things happen, but for some reason, I think my mind just filters out the bad moments, because it's just like if I focus on that, then I feel like I'll just be I'll look at the world from a perspective of negativity.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's what Dad really has gotten right over his lifetime, is he knows that he is the creator. No matter what his situation might be or what the universe might be around him, he has found the ability to take whatever elements of stardust and possibility and any type of, laws that exist in nature. He's found a way to mold all of those into possibilities of creation. And then he creates it, and then he tends to it, and then he goes and he creates something else again. And that's a really extremely huge ability to have as a person.
And no matter and no matter what, I will say that like my father always finds a way to like make people laugh or find a comedy in things. You know, he can have deep conversations. You know, I've had deep conversations with him before, but like I think my dad likes to stay on the side of like the lighter things in life and being happy and, you know, portraying and putting positive energy out into the universe and the people around you. Because with my family, of course we fight, we get in arguments, we get mad with each other. But I think the fact that we grew up having parents that were so loving and caring and didn't hold grudges against people that might have did them wrong, because I was there. I experienced some of those scenarios. I mean, I'm a child, so it might be warped on some reality of like, you know, how it actually happened. But my mom and dad was just like still going to the same church, still gonna, you know, be nice and commune with these people and invite them to my house and, you know, check on them, whether it was a storm or just a regular weekend. It's just like, we're gonna do this. Mom and dad were just, and even mom was like that, not just dad, but like I think about him and I try to tell, you know, when I'm in a relationship, I try to be like, I want that, you know, and I get it. It's hard because like people aren't your parents, right? Like you wouldn't even date your mom or your dad if like, you know, if they were reincarnated or something and you weren't, because it would be weird, right? But you look at the characteristics of their relationship and their actions and you want to mimic it and you want to clone it but we never think about the fact that you don't want to just clone something. You want to take it and you want to take the DNA, you want to alter it to fit who you are and the person you're dating, as opposed to being just like, we're just going to be happy and we're just going to follow our parents' relationship to the T. With the person, you're not taking into consideration that the person that you're dating didn't experience that. They might have grew up in a completely different environment. Yep. So they might wonder, like, when you get angry or when I get angry, I like step away, right? Because I've been in a relationship where it was just like, I'm mad. And then I'm walking away and it's just like, where are you going? You're running away from the problem. Like, no, I'm not running away from the problem. I get angry. When I get angry, or what I like to say is, in a heated rage, there's an absence of thought. Like, I don't have time to process thought if I'm angry. I'm too busy thinking like, okay, you're making me angry. Right. So
I want to hit on that if you're okay with this. And I know this is a bit, it exposes you a little more to some raw emotions, right? Mm-hmm. But why do you think it is that you get angry like that? And the emotion takes over, right? Because that's why you got to remove yourself, because you haven't learned to master that emotion. Why do you think you get angry?
I think most of my anger, I'm not going to, look, this is not a therapy session, but I'm not 100% sure why I get angry.
So that should be your answer. If you're not 100% sure, you should always stick to your original answer, because that's your answer. What you're going to try to do is you're going to expound a little bit more on it, and I do that a lot, and I'm trying to teach myself that when I start to ramble, I'll eventually say something that may not necessarily be as much of a gravitational pull, but it's what was in my mind at the moment as I'm working through possibilities. And then what happens later is later on you round back and you're like, dang, I didn't have time enough to work through this, so maybe I should have said this instead. So I'm trying to get really good at that. But I'll tell you why you're angry to round back, and I'll pass it back. But when we were children, so first, let me address your first thing. So yes, Dad had always been super involved in our lives. He used to, when he was still working, it wasn't just when he was sick, he would come home at night with these glow sticks from the shipyard that we would break. That. Do you remember those? Yeah. So he made a conscientious effort that even though he was going from 4 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day, he still did small things to let us know that he was there. Okay. Anyway, so let's round back. Why you're angry. Mm-hmm. When we were children being raised, our parents did the best they could with what they knew. Okay? We only know what we know. We can't think of what we don't know.
True.
Here's what happened. In strong Southern Christian households like the one we were raised, where the Bible was the law, we went to church 3 times a week. We were there multiple other times doing stuff, right? Mm-hmm. What happened is that because of that strong Christian faith, the response to children being bad is to tell them to either stay out of grown folks' business right? Like if they're listening to someone else's conversation or trying to butt in. They also said, stop before I give you something to cry for. And maybe that wasn't necessarily Christian, right? It could have been some other element splashed in there. But at the end of the day, be quiet before I give you something to cry for. And then it's like, shut all that noise up, like in the store or et cetera. All different types of things. What happened was we realized at a very young age that we were going to get in more trouble if we expressed our emotions. So instead of learning how to work through our emotions, to sit with them, which is why you'll see some of these parents sitting on the floor with their kid and their kids being bad or throwing stuff and they're not spanking them and other people are judging, like I probably would have about 15 years ago. They understand that the child needs to learn how to work through the emotion so that later on they've developed a skill that they can control their emotions and stay out of some of the issues that we've run into in relationships, not just personal, but other relationships we need in life to get to the to be better in life at that point.
Wow, that I didn't even think about that.
We've just suppressed it the entire time.
I didn't even think about it. I also when you said that, I was also thinking right before you stopped me and was like, that should be the first answer, was, without going into detail, I think like my biggest problem with anger when it comes to me communicating in relationships is like, I want my partner to take me serious. Not that like I'm like, I've had this experience where like someone would ask me, like my significant other would be like, I'm having this at work. I don't like my job or something's bothering me. And then I'd be like, okay, well, let's talk about how we can fix it. And then I will say something like that. And then it would be like, no response. Like just completely ignore me or don't say anything. And then what follow up is just like, okay, well, let me give an example. How about you think about going back to school? And it's just like, what am I going to do? I'm not smart enough, or no one's going to want to hire me. And then like, to me, when negativity piles on scenarios, it makes me feel like, well, I'm trying to solve this problem, or I'm trying to help you work out your problem. And then like, when I feel like someone doesn't take me serious or don't like communicate with me effectively, then I'm like, but I'm trying. Like, and maybe that's not what that person wants. Like maybe that's not how they communicate. Right. And I try to alter myself and just be like, I'm going to listen. And then I would get in trouble because after they say what they said, I don't respond because I'm trying a different tactic where I'm not going to suggest anything. I think maybe they just want someone to listen to them. And then the response is, you don't really care. You're not listening to me. And then I'm just like, I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. You don't take my suggestions serious. You just shoot them down. And then when I do, take an ulterior motive or a solution to try to fix a problem by just being a listener, it's like I should be talking because you want me to respond. And then I just feel stuck because I'm just like, what do I do? And I be like, maybe I should just ask, but then I still get no response. And then I'm just kind of like, okay, the thing about me is I do not like scenarios of insanity where people do the exact same thing or they complain about things constantly, but they don't want to change them. It bothers me on such a deeper level because it's just kind of like, you have every possibility. You're a free will being living this world, making your own decisions, hopefully good ones that benefit you and the people in your life. But like, don't just sit there and wallow in sorrow and not feel like you're in a downward spiral. You don't want to get help. You don't want to see a therapist. You don't want to like do other things in your life. And this is not just a relationship. This is friends and family. A lot of my friends, I'm just like, I can't. Like, I care. When I care about people, I want them to have the best, and I try not to intervene or speak too much. But sometimes I just feel like I don't know. And I think there's a large part of my anger just comes from feeling like, if I'm friends with someone or I'm in a relationship, if that person don't value my words as much as I feel like I value theirs, if they tell me something to help me out.
I think there are a lot of things at play there, and I won't necessarily try to comment on them, but a lot of people don't know how. I've learned it about, and when I say I've learned, everything that I could ever suggest are things that I've just mulled over in my mind for quite some time. So there have been moments where I just didn't know how to do something, or I didn't really understand how strong of a change it would create if I actually tried it. Like they tell you to make your bed when you get up in the morning. And a lot of people, I didn't listen to that for years. I just got up and didn't make my bed. But you realize as you continue to go, it makes small effects. And I have a small story if I can share it with you. I wrote a while back. It's called the messy book bag theory. Kind of did a presentation at work on it for some folks, and have used it a couple of different places. But basically, the messy book bag theory says that a kid goes to school one day and he shows up in class and the teacher asks for his homework. Well, he starts to reach in his book bag, but his papers are all balled up in the bottom of his book bag with books shoved on top of him because he has a messy book bag, right? And he has to get it out and unball it and give it to the teacher. Well, the messy book bag theory says that the person with the messy book bag also has a messy locker. And they also have a messy car. Oh. And if you take that car to their house and their room is also going to be messy. The small things we do in life that we don't think impact anyone else or anything else and it's insignificant, those small details actually have an impact in multiple places, unlimited places in our lives. And there are a lot of things we aren't getting better at because we didn't change those small habits. And we really got to start paying attention to the very small details because those details are what run our lives.
Wow. Man, I didn't even think about that. I mean, I guess that's why you make 6 figures and I make $2 a day. What I
make is it's relative, right? Like because everyone's at the exact same level when their mindset. They think they make good money. They say I'm doing better than someone else because we got to compare. Yeah. And then we say, oh, but I'm not doing as good as this many people. And then we try to get there. So no matter how much money we make, we're all potentially stuck in that exact same cycle of wanting more, but also having to rank other people lower. It's an automatic thing that happens in our mind psychologically.
Yeah.
Wow. One thing I will go back and say to something you mentioned earlier is the biggest thing that changed my current relationship, and it took me 30 some years, right, to get to this point, is when we made the mutual decision after going back and forth like that so many different times on so many different topics. We made the decision that whatever the other person said was going to be true. And it took us a while to get there. But we sat there and we made the commitment, and it took us multiple failures, right? Which failure is really practice until you quit. But at the end of the day, we said whatever she says or whatever I say is exactly the truth. And we've had to believe it, that the other person was being 100% honest with us. And that has worked ridiculous miracles.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to use that in my relationship then when it comes to like just whatever they say is 100% true.
Yep.
Because like I never doubt but I feel like I'm being doubted. But I mean, hey, it is what it is. But we're gonna change the topic because that's like a whole nother scenario. But like, so what do you think about in relation to? So there's a memory that I remember very fondly growing up, and we're gonna get into deeper stuff. But just for right now, it just popped in my head, and I was thinking about it. When we were younger, our parents let us go outside. Okay, there was two different scenarios, right? We had what was considered pretty much a ditch next to our house, but we call it Part-Time River.
Yeah,
it was not a river, but we were so small,
not even close.
It could have been a river to us, maybe on some level, or just our imaginations,
right?
And we went there, and I remember in particular this one scenario. We was walking on the ice. It was freezing cold, and we were walking on the ice, and we were just like being mischievously walking on this ice, and like it started cracking. I remember, this is my interpretation of the story because I don't remember everything. All I remember is I was the one on the ice, and then I fell into the ice, and I got wet. Yes. And then we was trying to figure out how we was going to get in the house without mom to send me when I was getting in trouble. And I was just like, and I don't remember how we came to the conclusion or what even happened. I don't even know if we got in trouble for it. I think y'all made me go in a van.
Yeah, it was like was there a broke down car in the yard or something? Maybe it was a van. And maybe it worked. I can't remember. But yeah, we made you stay in the van, and we went in the house, got clothes, threw them through the window, and then came back out and got you changed to get you back inside.
Yeah, so we weren't perfect. That
was awesome.
Yeah, that was fun. And then there was a one time, also it was in the wintertime, our parents let us go outside, and we went into the field, and I lie to you not, to this day, you couldn't tell me it was a blizzard, and we was in Antarctica somewhere, because we went into the middle of the field, it was snow everywhere, it was snowing, and we couldn't see anything but white. And I remember, like, I don't know if someone was like, leave me behind, Or like I just remember us carrying somebody, or I think it was Candace, dragging her along, and I remember being scared, like, oh my God, we're gonna die out here.
Yeah, we were pretty extra. I think that was great though. That was the thing about being a kid or a child, is like you could always be right in the moment. That level of creativity has been stunted by all of the data we've had to learn for jobs and how to maneuver through society. And that sheer level of creativeness and exploration and learning through experience, all of that stuff has kind of got whitewashed because it's not necessarily needed anymore. So we just kind of push it to the side and don't do much with it. And that's what we use. I mean, we're supposed to use our vacations for, but most of us don't take vacations.
True.
And then when we do take vacation time, it's sporadically because we're so busy just doing something regular instead of actually planning something that's going to reinvigorate our lives.
Oh, I agree. And I think sometimes what I do, because I can only speak from my perspective, is like, even when like, I think I'm so always thinking about the future and like, oh, the next bill, or like getting this particular thing paid off in time, that like me focusing on paycheck to paycheck or this event happening in my life. Like right now I'm just like, oh, I got these 2 weddings in May. Then before I know it, May is going to be here. And the next thing you know, it's going to be June or July. And I'm going to be like, wait, it's already like, 6 months into the year. Like, I think when we get older, when you're a child, like you said, we live in a moment. We don't look at time on the spectrum of paychecks or bills being due. But when you say, like you said, when you get programmed and you get into the real world and you start looking at time in the spectrum of like, oh, this paycheck, that paycheck, this vacation, and this time, like you want time to go by so fast and you're so focused in the future that, like you said, people don't live in the moment. They just tend to be like, I'm ready for this to get here. And then you look back and you're like, dang, where did 2022 go?
Yep. I don't know if I'd be curious to know the solution. There is always a solution if we find one. That's how mankind has evolved as far as we have. Is that we've always been willing to look outside of what we thought was possible and challenge that. And then once we challenge that, we'd find different ways of doing things. Even if the solution wasn't what we originally thought it would be, we've taken derivatives of the solution, which were originally failures, and found ways to use those to make ourselves more successful. And that's an absolutely dynamic power as well. So yeah, it's a really difficult thing when it comes to some of those things. And I think though that if we keep fighting and trying, that we can eventually solve every problem that we have.
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree with that as well. I mean, hopefully I'll look back in 5 years and be like, man, I remember when I made that podcast, and be like, I'm so different now, or I am slightly altered from the person that I was there, but for the better, hopefully, and not for the worse. So I will say that growing up in a house of like 6 kids, like all of us there, I fondly remember, like, of course we got in arguments, so we got in fights, and I don't know why, but for some reason me and Sam always butted heads, and I don't know why. Like I can't remember why, but I think we just always butted heads, and we always like got in fights and arguments. But like the crazy thing is, like right now in my life, I know we fought a lot, but like whenever I see him, or I always have love for my brother, and he's always my brother, and I don't think about the time that we was in the field and I kept like falling back and kicking him over, and then we end up getting into a real fight because like I don't know if he got anger and he got mad and he just wanted, like, I remember those moments, or like the time my sister Candace her finger got caught in the door and cut off. Actually she had a lot of bad things happen to her. Like she fell out of a moving van. I'm not gonna put all her business out there, but she had a lot of things happen to her.
It was a rough go for a while there, things back to back for her.
Yeah, and then and then you grew up. And I remember you were of course you were the oldest, so like you graduated high school and you went to ECU. And like, I don't know if I don't remember that many people that went to college, because I know a lot of people went to college. But I remember one, you had a neon car that had fucking lights in the bottom of it and in the inside of the car.
She was beautiful.
Yeah, and you were
thought so.
You were all playing Sean Paul, because I didn't know who he was until you came back from college, and it was like put on the. And I was just like, we were just like, who the hell is this man?
Yes.
But then we were all bumping it and like into it for a while. So, so what I'm getting at with this in particular is just like all of my memories with all of my brothers and sisters, like they mold my perception of them even to this day. Like you guys are always my brothers and sisters. You're always like, no matter what they do, no matter whether we get in an argument now as adults, like we can go months without seeing each other or years, and then we'll like reconnect on Thanksgiving or Christmas, and then it's just kind of like we pick up where we left off. And I don't know if that's common for most people.
Let me ask you: are you? Is your relationship with your friends the exact same thing? If you strip away the blood and you just look at your friends on the same lens based on those same specific characteristics, would you say that your friendships are the exact same way?
Yeah, I would say so on some levels. Like the thing about it is I don't think I ever try to make friends just for like, I don't know if you want to say gain in like certain areas, or like they might have something you want or something like you might be interested in using them. It's just like I make friends based on like I think how I treat or how I am with my brothers and sisters. I'm looking for people that not necessarily going to replace them, but I can have a family within these group of people, and like I can lean on them and we can talk and we have deep conversations. We can have nothing meaningless like let's just drink and hang out and go slip and slide on something, or go bowling. So I think I try to make friends that are like that have that same level of connection with my brothers and sisters. Because I don't think I want someone that's gonna like that I'm gonna fight with all the time. Like I do have arguments with some of my friends, but like not on the lines of like someone used me, like fool me once, fool me twice. More like I'm very strict with like I'll meet somebody, if I get a vibe and I like them, cool. If I don't, then I just block them and I don't try again. But I'm like I said, I'm just very picky. I think it's the same.
Yeah, that's good though. But what that will ultimately mean is that you control the narrative that you tell yourself about your connection with people and about how you respond when things don't go well. There will always be problems that exist in any relationship. So how we respond to one relationship is how we respond to all relationships. And that's how some people, like our friends, we hang out with them all the time. We love them to death, and we see them just like family. Not that they should replace family, but also our belief is that what does blood really bind us to? Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's good to say I've got blood brothers and blood sisters because I love y'all with all my heart, and that will never change. My deep relationship with you can never be replaced. However, the same love that I share you and I share to all mankind.
Yeah.
And if I'm not that consistent, am I really truly authentic as a person? I want to be what I am. I can't be everything, but what I am, I want to be it fully. So if I say I'm love, I can't love one person less than I love someone else. That love is multiplied on each person, and it's weighted the exact same, and then it comes back to me.
Wow. So I mean, this is probably a little bit controversial. So what you're saying is that like you equally love your kids and no one is your favorite.
It's actually funny. It's actually funny you say that. So years back when I was studying quantum physics, I can't remember who it was, but it was this video I watched all the time, right? And it was like, does the world really exist? But there's a guy in there talking, and someone interviewed him and asked him a question. He said, this guy interviews me. He said, which one of your kids do you love more out of the 3 kids he had? And he said, ultimately, his answer was, if I were to cut you 3 slices of this pie and give them to you over 30 minutes, and I ask you which slice tastes better, which one would you say? And the answer is that they all taste exactly the same. And so his point was that it's not that there's not an answer to that question. It's that the answer itself is just absolutely inappropriate.
True. Okay, that's good. Well, I can say Mom loves Christmas.
That's okay.
I'm joking. I don't know. I think my mama loves us equally. We all stress her out on some level. And,
of course. Of course. And my mind, I'll be honest with you, I never thought about who they loved more, because I feel like if I entertain certain questions, that only creates a rabbit hole that opens the possibility more of something bad coming about that. Like nothing good can come about me thinking about who my parents might love more. And ultimately, if the answer is a certain thing, if I'm not saying I'm ignorant to it, but if there was a certain answer, what could I change about that answer? And does that change who I am as a person, or how much she loves me, regardless of what that love might appear to be between them?
True. Oh, well, look, everything I say, you just crumble it up and throw it in the trash.
No. So you know me, and a lot of times people will think I'm controversial, right? Like, or I'm always trying to be. Here's what I do. I like to challenge the perspective. That's how I've gotten better at writing. That's why I love certain movies like Christopher Nolan's movies. Phenomenal, right? And I get to see all these different levels. Instead of just automatically going with what the first thought is, I try to think of every potential thought that could occur, who would think it, what their background would be like, what their present would be like if they chose that decision, and then what their future would look like if they continue with that decision over the future. And then I test all of those over time, and then I try to make my decisions. And so all I want to do is show people the various worlds that exist out here that we can be a part of if we're willing to change the way we think. Because we can't change ourselves or anything else until we change the way we perceive things.
Which is true. I agree with that. So, I mean,
the choice is insignificant. I will say that. I don't care what choice you make. That's the great thing about it. You get to make whatever choice you want. There are multiple perspectives for a reason. So, I am there for what I need to be there for, and to think through those and to present the data, but I don't believe that whatever choice you make is wrong. Okay. I think there is no right or wrong in certain instances.
Wow, interesting.
So sorry, I'm running off there.
No.
You know how I like to do it.
That's fine with me. I mean, I'm kind of running out of topics in my mind now because I just felt like we went into so many different areas and talked about so many different things on a deeper level that I'm just kind of like, wow, well, where could I go from here? And I think one thing that I did write down on my notepad that we could talk about was like, of course, I've said before in my other podcasts if people have listened to it, but I'll say it again. It's like, I mean, we were raised Christian, you know. And the crazy thing is, the way we were raised, I didn't feel like there was like Pentecostal, Baptist. Like, I don't ever remember those titles. I just remember my mom and dad being like, we're going to church, we're Christian. Like, you know.
Right.
And when I got older, I realized there's just division. There's like so many different churches or versions of like the church that you could possibly go to and what they believe in. And I was like, man, why is Christianity so divided for a book that's supposed to be, you know, I guess, but everyone has their interpretation, the perspective of life. So how you read it is your own interpretation. But I guess what I'm trying to get to is like, where are you, like, since we both grew up spiritual and we were both involved in the church in different areas of our lives, maybe multiple times or just once, like, what do you feel like you are spiritually in your life right now?
I will say religious wars have been back well before the Bible with people's beliefs and thinking differently, right? And whatever God that may be, whether that be some omniscient being in the sky who controls everything, or whether it's just the God of whatever it is that you believe is most important in your life, right? Like, God exists in many forms. And I think we say that in church, but then we don't really believe that because we dismiss what other people believe. And dismissing what other people believe is not really existing that God exists in everything. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where my spirituality is, right? And it's not that I do not believe, it's that I believe it all. And I really believe that because you think about the Tower of Babylon, right? They used to talk about Tower of Babylon or Babel, I believe it was. They're building this big tower to the sky, and God had to divide their languages so that they didn't build a tower to the heavens, right? So are they saying that maybe they would have got to a level of atmosphere that wouldn't have been appropriate and could have killed them? Or was that really literally saying that they were going to build a tower to reach heaven where God was if they were stayed on one accord? Wow. If it is the latter, right? If it is that they were going to actually reach the throne of God, would that not mean that the culmination of everyone working together with all of their different perspectives, beliefs, and knowledge put together puts us back in the level of being in the godhood that we should have been in? And I'll leave it there.
I mean, I never thought about it from the perspective of like God could possibly divided them in language, not because he was scared that it was going to get to him, but more along the lines of like, no, y'all gonna kill each other. You can't breathe this far up. You're just gonna die, and you're gonna make thousands of people die trying to complete this tower. Because back in those days, they probably would have been like, oh, they keep dying. Well, we'll just keep sending more up there until we get where we need to be. Yeah, you know. And
there's a plague.
Yeah, like I don't think there is, and that's the crazy thing about like growing up in the church and then getting where I am right now, like spiritually where I am right now is like. I feel like, and I said this in one of my podcasts that people have already probably listened to by now, is that internal, like I said this earlier when we were here before we started the podcast, which was like, I feel like the church or organized religion on some level, because I'm not against it, right? I don't hate or dislike any church or any form of religion or people that don't even believe, that might be atheists. I just feel like everyone is valid in their own point, like you say. But I also feel like the church churches, people might call them cult mentality, but churches tend to be like, we need to congregate together. We need to stay around like-minded people so we can spiritually be stronger. And then we kind of report or turn to this one pastor or pope or whatever title they might have. There's just someone who's higher up, and you all kind of seek that person and take knowledge and wisdom because you believe they're at this kind of hierarchy level or close enough to God where he speaks directly through them to deliver a message.
Right.
And my thing about that is like, I was talking about this, was just like, I don't think, for me, after I got outed by the pastor, or he prayed for me and told everybody that, I had homosexual thoughts and whatever, what happened in that moment for me, and I don't know if many people know, is just like, I always tell myself, even to this day, that that version of me died. Like, not like physically, but like mentally. You have to think, the thing that I was feeling and I was dealing with internally, before I even approached the pastor and started talking to him, I was dealing with it internally in myself when these feelings started happening towards men. And then I spoke to him. I didn't talk to mom and dad. I didn't tell them. I went to the pastor myself because I was raised a certain way, and I was like, I need to speak to someone of a higher level. Kind of what the church kind of does is like, you need to go to someone who's close enough to God that God might speak through them to provide or reveal something to them to provide that information you need to kind of fight off or win the battle that you're dealing with. Mm. And I spoke to him for weeks off and on, telling him, this and this. He made suggestions, if you think about it, pinch yourself, or if you have these thoughts, immediately bend down and pray to God and ask for forgiveness. I was doing all of these things he was telling me behind closed doors for counsel, doing these things secretly, and it wasn't working. And then the moment that he practically pulled me to the front of the church, I didn't know what was going to happen. So when he said it, I just remember very vividly time slowing down. Yeah. Like when the words left his mind, time slowed down. I don't recall how long it happened. I don't know if it was a few minutes or if it was like just a few seconds when he pushed me down and I fell to the ground. And like, and now I look back on it, I was like, those people probably felt like he was delivered. That's why he's on the ground crying. But in my perspective, I felt like I was thinking so many possibilities. What is my family going to think? I haven't done anything to this point. Like, how can you?
So you didn't fall because you were mended. You weren't in tears. You were mended. You were down because you were in despair.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how I was going to rebuild myself. How was I going to get up and walk back to where I was sitting and feel like the whole church was looking at me and judging me? And mind you, let me explain something. This was not a church of just like a mega church of 100 and some people, and I didn't know half of them. This was like all family and friends and really close people. It was a very small church. There might have been 50 or 60, maybe 70 people.
Very small community, very small town surrounding. So that information didn't just stay with one locale. It surrounded you by everyone that you would know.
And I remember getting up, and I remember sitting in the back of the church, and the only thing I thought about, I was pissed. I wasn't even mad at the pastor. I was mad at God. I bypassed the person who did what they did to me, and I went straight to the source where I felt like I thought I did all the right things, and I confided in your servant, the person that I know in my life to be the closest thing to you, apart from my parents, but I wasn't going to tell them because I don't want to be judged by my parents. And you allowed this to happen. It wasn't until like after we went back home and I went kind of walking off in the field by myself, and I remember walking in the field, and I just remember, man, I can't believe I'm saying this. I remember rebuking God, being like, I'm done. Like, I cannot believe, like, I don't understand. I didn't do anything.
We've all done. I wouldn't say we all have done it, but I've done it. I get it.
I was just so angry, and I did not the crazy thing is I wasn't even thinking about a pastor. He wasn't even cross my mind. It was just like, no, you the one I prayed to. You're the one that I did this for, and I dedicated. Like, we were raised in a church, so all I knew was Christianity and God. I had no access to any other religions existing, even though I knew they did. I just knew they were wrong. Yeah. So all of that happened, and I remember going through the film and being like, I'm going to kill myself. Like, I was like, I'm just going to kill myself. And it was this one time that I think y'all found me in the kitchen or something, and I had a knife. And, like, I remember, it might not be correct, but I think y'all started laughing because y'all thought it was funny. And I was like, I didn't even know how to kill myself. I wasn't even smart enough to know. So, like, I just knew I didn't, and plus I really didn't want to do it. But what I mean by when I say I died in that moment was like in that time frame that the pastor said what he said, and I had to get up and walk to the back of the church. There was like I said, time slowed down, and I felt like I had to think of every possibility, every outcome. Was my parents going to kick me out? Was my would people treat me differently? Would my friends like Andre and other people not want to even hang around me anymore because they don't believe? All they think is I'm a homosexual. And when we grew up, there was only one homosexual man in town, and he he was
shunned by the community. I remember those stories about how he got locked up or something for messing with some boy, and who knows was it an older boy? Who knows? No one really talked about that part, but because he was homosexual, I do remember he stayed on the back street.
Yep, and people would go by.
There were stories around the town about it.
Mm-hmm. And it was crazy, and that's what I was also scared about. Like, would people just be telling stories and stuff? And I just went through that whole phase where I was just like that version of myself. But I'm so happy because I think about it now. I was just like, if I wouldn't be who I am today if that wouldn't have happened. If I would have just kept, what if I had believed that I was delivered and he did the right thing, and then at some point in my life, I don't know what would have happened. Maybe I would have just suppressed it and married a female thinking that's what needed to happen, and then lived what I believe would have been a false life, and probably brought kids and a white woman or another human being into a fake reality or a false sense of reality because I'm trying to push this narrative that I've been taught and kind of programmed in me since I was younger. Yeah. But luckily for me, I think what ended up happening was the best thing that happened was the black church in general don't know what to do about homosexuality, especially back then, that it wasn't talked about, or it wasn't talked about to me. Like, no one approached me, no one treated me. It was just kind of like hush hush.
Right. No one talks about it.
Mm-hmm. No one talks about it. So since no one talked about it, I felt like everything that happened to me was internal and less like me being approached by other people or people actually treating me different. It was just kind of like hush hush, don't talk about it, don't nobody say anything.
So I'm going to say this, and first of all, I apologize about you having to go through that. I know I didn't do it directly, but I apologize on the behalf of those folk for what they did or didn't do inadvertently. It's not okay. And I wish I had the know-how back then to know how serious what you were going through was, and that we were closer, that you would have felt safe confiding in me earlier on, and that I could have been that voice that you needed in that moment. So I'm going to say this. Every institution, and I don't want to just harp on the church, but every institution that exists has the exact same problem. The companies you work for, right? Companies that we would typically work for, then they would typically have an overall arching statement that says, this is who we are. We're here to enrich the lives of people. But somewhere in the hierarchy, in multiple places, it's extremely hard to root out. There are those bad apples, those bad managers who talk to their team members, or they spread the information when they shouldn't, et cetera, et cetera. And now that could be at work. That could be in your friendships, where there's someone who takes your information and gives it to someone else and they shouldn't have. That is in, mental institutions. You could talk about finance companies. It exists across every spectrum. Yeah. And so the idea is that I want you to know that even though you experience that who you are can't be tarnished by something that is external to yourself unless you allow it to be, because that's going to always exist in your life. So what we allow happen to us in one aspect will affect all the other aspects without our knowledge. So you stay true to yourself, you keep believing in who you are, and no matter what happens, then you remember that you can use that as power to become more of who you are as a person, and raise your voice. And then the last thing I'll say about that is that at the end of it, right? Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of people don't want it, but the way that the government has been going into companies and making sure that their HR departments are right, that people are having rights. How many women do you have at the top versus like men? What's your diversity look like in here, right? Mm-hmm. How many African American managers do you have at this specific level? They're getting involved in all that type of stuff now, and it's helping alleviate some of the issues, or a lot of the issues that exist at the core from these factions that exist that people can't seem to get around, that they've been complaining about since the early days of industry, and nothing's happened. And I think that same thing needs to happen with the church.
Oh no, I mean, and I don't want to make it seem like I don't care for the church, because I don't.
Right.
My issue is that like you said, it happens in all institutions in all forms. But like I can only speak from my perspective, and
Right.
I spiritually I still do believe in God, and I tried to find a church when I went to Greensboro. I didn't have a problem with it. There were some LGBT friendly churches that I went to and I looked at, but I just feel like my thing is like the thing that bothers me the most is like the whole protection of the church that's kind of been intertwined into our government, where like churches don't get taxed, and I'm just like, I don't understand how that makes sense. Like, regardless of whether you believe in someone's religion or not, from my perspective, it's still a business. If you're asking people for money, then that money should be reported, and you should pay taxes on the fact that you're giving people money. Because, like, how can you collect millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars, even if it's a small church? You're collecting money, right? You're taking people money. You're telling them that either one, you're on the extreme, you're kind of using people and saying, give me this amount of money, or you should be giving 10%. Like, I remember going to the church, and like when I first got my first job at Burger King, my mom and them like, make sure you're giving tithes. And my grandma, oh God, grandma will always be like, you giving 10% to God, or what, 15% to God? I'm like,
I remember tithes.
I'm like, man, I mean, I don't mind paying tithes, but like, we went to a church, I don't know if it was Pastor Riddick Church, but like, no, I don't know what church it was, but remember, like, they would call families to the front of the church sometimes, and like take up an offering to help them.
Yeah,
Like,
I remember that.
Those moments like that in church make me be
Those
like,
are
man,
different.
this is
Yeah.
amazing. Like,
I forgot about those. I forgot that happened. Yeah, that happened quite a few times.
The fact that they would be like, they wouldn't even say what the family was going through. They would just call the family to the front of the church and say, this family is going through some things. Who would like to give to help this family out? That was the gist of it. And I think that happened to us once, or maybe one of our family members. Yeah. And people would just give money. Like, that's moments like that gives me faith in humanity. Like, It's not about the pastor wearing a nice suit, right? And it's not saying the pastor don't deserve it, but I remember the days where pastors actually worked and still were the head of the church, right?
Yep.
Now it's just like, it becomes like a business, right? Because that's the whole thing. It's like, well, I need to be compensated fully. God talks directly through me. I need... you need to take care of me. And I'm not trying to say it's okay or it's wrong, because like, it's to each their own. If the church want to do that for them, they're fine. But like, if I were a pastor, or if I were of some higher, even in a job, if I was, making big money, I feel like I would always try to give. Sometimes I would see a homeless person on the street and I would offer to give them a burger, or I would be like, let me sit down and, have a conversation, and I can get you something to eat. You seem cold, or you need some money. Yeah. Something like that. Like, I don't expect anything in return. I don't expect them to say thank you. I don't expect them to see me next time and be like, oh my God, thank you for helping me out. I do those things because you give and don't expect.
Right.
Right? Because I think that's the purest form of like just being a good human being from my perspective. It's like, so the church not being taxed is something that I just never understood. I was just like, now at this point, like, you have mega million churches, and on TikTok, which I probably shouldn't have, I'll see like I'll people post it, and I don't know how I got into this genre of TikTok, but it's like it'll always be like a mega church pastor standing up being like, it was this one pastor, he was looking at his watch and he was talking to the Congress, and he was like, look at his watch, ooh, 300,000 on my wrist, God just blessing me. Now if you give 300, I can get a jet. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, this has to be like a joke. Like, this has to be like a comedy thing. And then I got stuck in that TikTok where it's just constantly like these pastors like standing up in front of the congregation asking for things. And I'm not saying all churches and all pastors are like that, or any church, not just Christianity, but any religion. Yeah. I just always feel like there's a level of corruption, and and that always gets the news and gets on people's mind more than the small dedicated people, like that church we went to, and the man was taking offering for families and still worked a full-time job. But I don't know. I was just ranting about, like, I don't want to make it seem like I don't like the church or have a problem. I just feel like it's an institution that collects money from citizens that work their hard-earned money and pay taxes and also give to the church. The church should be giving back to the government so the government can provide services to the people. That just makes sense to me. Like, if a church makes $1 billion, you telling me they can't be taxed on that at all, and they just sit on it? And that's not even just the church. It's also like nonprofit foundations. Like, how do you call yourself a nonprofit, but you actually paying your employees? Like, you got to be getting money from somewhere.
Yeah. I can't speak enough on that aspect. I will say, And you know me, I always like to. I don't like to be the person to play devil's advocate. I don't like that because it's, I'm not advocating for the devil in any fashion. I am simply advocating for a level of understanding and hope for all things. So I think for me, I just don't know, right? Like, I mean, the nonprofit had to be established for a specific reason. And in addition to that specific reason it was established, there had to be a categorization that an institution could fall under, or criteria that would fit a specific nonprofit, or right. So then you have all these other nonprofits now that can fit into that mold, and they're different type of institutions that do different things.
Yeah.
So I get the grouping from a mental perspective, and doing additional research would make more sense. However, there are things about the church, I also agree, the exact same thing, that there are things that should be done. Yeah, they probably shouldn't be a nonprofit and should be taxed. Perhaps, yeah. My honest belief, though, at the core of it, is that every city or county should have one specific church. It doesn't need to be a building. It could be a bunch of tents put up in the field. Let the church own the land. That's perfectly fine. Put the land in all people's name, as a matter of fact. All right? Then generations of hundreds of people would have land that they could say is theirs, even if they never own land. All right. Anyway, we won't go down that rabbit hole. So you have that happen, a bunch of tents, everybody get together, you hang out. If you want to do something specific on the Sunday that you're supposed to have church, if you're going to use Sunday as, if it's going to be Saturday, that's fine too. Whatever day it is that you're supposed to have church, instead of standing there preaching and taking up offering, everybody hit the streets and you go out to places that you know need help. Did you just hear about a home that got destroyed by a fire and you see the people trying to pick through their stuff? Everyone's going to meet over there and help that. There was a hurricane that came through 2 weeks ago. You know what we're going to do for church for the next 6 months until we're done? Everyone who's able is going to get together. People who want to cook because they can't do physical labor are more than welcome to cook. People who can do physical labor and are strong enough, let's help sort this stuff out and cut down some tree limbs and haul this stuff off. Yeah. And we all do a bit of the job, so it comes out of our pockets equally. And when it comes out equally amongst that many people, it's a very small amount that doesn't really impact that person.
Yeah. You
changing the world, and you're not giving your house away for it.
True. And that's true. I mean, I agree. I think maybe a solution for the church would be like, if a church make a certain amount of money, they report revenue to the government, and then if you are in a certain tax bracket, or if you make a certain amount of money, then you have to pay taxes on that. Because there are some churches that just aren't making that much money to be able to pay taxes. So or like may not like, because I mean we went to a lot of small churches when we was growing up. Like I always said, mom and dad was like traveling ministers. Like we would go to a small church, help them musically. Dad would be help with the instruments. Mom would help sing sometimes. Yeah. And then once church got big enough, I feel like we would always just move to another church that was small and then help them. And I was telling Chris the other day during our podcast, was like, listen, I feel like my parents gave us the perfect scenario and solution. Is we never stayed at the church long enough for it to get big enough, and then possibly get to a point where it could be corrupt. We were there long enough to watch it build and grow. Right. And then we would move on to the next one. And I'm not trying to say we went to like 1,000 different churches, but I just
went to enough.
Yeah, we went to enough to feel like we weren't just stuck at one church for 20 years or 15. Yeah.
I mean, four or five, maybe 6. I don't know.
And now they're going to the same small church.
Yeah, maybe, and that's now an official family church. Uncle Larry started, right?
Yeah,
he bought the building and they started that and bought that church, and then he started the church. And now, when he passed away, it went to Uncle Howard. So now it's actually like a family thing, which is pretty cool.
Wow. But who's gonna get it next?
That's a good question.
But go ahead. What were you about to say?
I hadn't even thought of that actually. I would hope they have all of that stuff in order. So. Okay, anyway, yeah. I'm sorry, what were we talking about?
I was just finished talking about like how we went from church to church and helped them become big, and then we would move to the next church and stuff like that.
Yeah, I wonder if that was automatic, like if that was the actual thought process of our parents, that they just always had to change, so they had to shift from one church to another. If they felt that their collective mission as a Parker family for our household was to help people who really needed help and get them to the level where they could take care for themselves and then transition to the next person who needed some help. I wonder if that was a thought process.
Wow, I'll probably have to ask mom and dad about that because I like as a child you just go with the flow. You don't make those decisions.
There's no choice.
You don't know why they do it, but they did it. You know what? Craziest thing, because it's going on almost an hour now. But I will say, change the topic after I say this, and maybe if you want to rebuttal and say something. But I remember a particular church, right? Mount Sinai in Murfreesboro. I remember when we used to go to like that building that used to be like a college, and it was an auditorium.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was an auditorium of my old. It was actually, I think, my preschool building before we transitioned in pre-K to the brand new school. Can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, me either. But I remember us going in their auditorium. Like, remember them breaking ground for when they bought the land and stuff, and then for some reason, once they got, I don't know if it was before they built the church or they was about to build the church, but we like just drifted off and we started going to Pastor Riddick Church or some other church. I don't know if Pastor Riddick was before Pastor Randy or was it after Pastor Randy?
I don't remember. I think I was pretty much transitioned out. I transitioned out around that time, and I was in college during Pastor Riddick, so that would have been 2002, which would have been that would have been after Pastor Randy, I think.
Yeah.
But that's a very good point. That's a very good point.
Wow. But yeah, I mean that's just that. Like, I will always have love for my faith and how my parents raised me, because I think they did it the best. They didn't shove it down our throat, but they made sure that we were present and active in the religion that they practiced and they believed in, without making us, like, once we got of age, like, I honestly don't know when the last time mom has asked me when you've been in church. But I think, like, sometimes she'll call me and be like, I want to pray for you. Or, she knew I was looking for a church and stuff. But, like, I don't think they've ever once called me and tried to be like, you need to go to church or you need to do this. It's just, how you been? What you doing? You grown. You make your own choices. Stuff like that. It's like a level of respect. Like, they didn't force us even after we got of age where you consider us adults, 18 and 19. It was like, you need to find a church while you're in college.
Right.
Well, I don't know. They never told me that.
No, they didn't. I mean, they've never been that authoritative with us about things. Certain things growing up, right? They had strong rules, but they were never authoritative about our own freedoms as we got older. And there are always mentions of Jesus this or God this, and that has trickled down drastically since I was in college from with mom and calling me and stuff, but. I also am not as out there as I was in college either, doing keg stands behind a frat house. So who knows if it tapered off for that reason. But still, we have conversations and there's not this constant thing. I have faith. I believe. My belief might be all-encompassing. But I had a conversation with my son, DJ, a while back. And he was kind of just talking to me about, my spirituality, and he felt like I was thinking too logically, and some other stuff, right? Like, am I being spiritual enough? Valid questions from a teenage kid who is really into Christ right now, and wants to spread that word, and he wants to understand why his own father may not have a certain level of faith, or why I'm thinking the way I do. Yeah, and I was in the shoes. I was headstrong in religion for a very long time, probably 4 times more than
McDonald's fried.
Didn't even talk to my parents for 2 years, right? But at the end of the day, I think we need to do better and focus on what we can actually change and how we handle those items. And DJ and I, we were saying, and I'm sorry, I was drifting off somewhere else there, but DJ was talking to me about that, and I basically responded back to him about that portion that everyone does the will of God differently. Just because you think that certain people are supposed to say, or I used to think, and everyone in that strong realm tend to think that, I should be doing something a certain way and saying, oh, well, you need to go preach to the highways and talk about Jesus and tell them all this stuff. You can't say I'm not a believer because my mission is to love people a different way. Every person I meet, I give them a type of love that they've never experienced before. And then they start to go try to find that love. And that love is actually what you symbolize as God. And that love is eternal. Yeah. And that love can be multiplied, right? Like, that's who you're worshiping. And so that's how I live and express my faith, is through a general, strong love for everybody.
No, I agree. I think,
and I still fuck up. It happens.
Yeah.
No matter how hard I try, I still fuck up.
I mean, because we're human. Like that's not an excuse to be like, well, we all fuck up. That we're human. That's what we're supposed to do. But I look at it from the perspective of just like growing up in church. I felt like people wanted me to blindly follow, right? Yep. And DJ mentioned something to me like that too about like, what's your faith like, you know? And like being a critical thinker. Sometimes people be like, well, if you're a scientist, then you can't believe in religion. And that's not true. A lot of scientists believe in some form of a higher power or a God, whether it's a Christian or whether it's Mormon or whether it's a different religion.
The more you learn, the more inescapable it becomes.
Yes, because there are things that science is not put there to discredit the Bible. Science is put there to just do what it does. You come up with a scientific theory, you test it multiple times to try to get the same results, and then that kind of is like, okay, that's fact. We do this happens. So, like, even now, we don't understand a certain amount of a certain thing, but 100 years from now, they might look at, wow, they were stupid. Like they
will.
Yeah, they were like they had no idea about anything. They were just dumb. They didn't have the knowledge back then. And you know, right now we think we know so much and we're so far. But like, I'm just like, you know, if nothing happens, no catastrophic event happens that wipe half the population out, and there's a reset. You know, but hopefully, you know, we advance. I just feel like right now, in regards to humanity in general, whether you're religious or not, that like being a critical thinker or being someone who questions things, it doesn't make you a bad person. You don't want to blindly follow. Like, I think that's the thing is like people want you to be like, just follow me. Say what I say. Don't question what I say because it doesn't matter. But, and this is even at work at your job. Like, I think it's good when we have team meetings at my job and they're like, anybody got any questions? I know they get tired of me because I'm always just like, I got a question now. Y'all talking about we making this change. Did y'all think about what's going to happen when you do this and how it's going to affect me, right? Yep. Because all corporate thinks about, like managers think about is like, we got to, well, I would say this from my perspective.
Right.
Whenever I'm in a meeting with my managers and stuff, all they do, and it pisses me off, is look at fucking charts and run numbers. I get it. Data is there and it's proven to be effective if you tweak things and make things right. But sometimes you have to remember that the people at the bottom are the ones doing the work. Like you can be like, I got an idea, I want to implement this into the team. And it's the same thing with like life. People at higher places want to be like, I have ideas, I want to implement them. But you don't really think about, or sometimes I feel like, at least in my job, they don't think about what the repercussions or the fact that the people like me have to put in extra work to get those numbers or tweak my, like, and I don't mind tweaking my behavior, but like to like help get these metrics, but I want to make sure that they understand that it's going to require more work on my part. And I don't think they understand that sometimes. I think people who used to be in IT, speaking from my perspective, when they get in management positions, they forget the implementations. I've had managers sit down and tell me, well, they'll talk about something changing. I'll be like, well, what about this? And they'll be like, well, I don't know how that process works. And I'm like, okay, so you're making choices and decisions, but you don't really know the process and what it is that we need to do. Well, I'll have to look into it. And I'm just like, all right, I give them the benefit of the doubt. They're probably in meetings all day, crunching numbers, doing spreadsheets, and, you know, making sure they're ready for the next meeting and going to multiple meetings. But like, I don't think sometimes in IT, management understands, or even the whole spectrum of life, when people get to a certain level, they forget where they came from, or not necessarily where they came from, but like the process or how hard it is when you're at the bottom, when changes happen from the top and how it affects the person at the bottom. Because I feel like I'm affected all the time. Like right now, we just went from like, we were salary, and it was just like the system will automatically assume we work 8 hours a day. Now they just recently changed where we have to clock in. And why they was just like, okay, you're going to clock in, you're going to clock out for lunch, you're going to clock back in when you're working, and then you're going to clock out at the end of the day. And then at the end of the meeting, I was like, okay, that's not bad. I wake up early anyways, boot up my computer, get ready, get myself ready for the day or whatever. Then at the end of it, it was like, by the way, on Fridays, you need to have your hours, your timesheet for the entire week submitted by 12 p.m. I'm like, wait a minute. I was like, wait, I'm confused. How am I supposed to work that Friday but also have the time, like my entire week submitted by 12 when I'm not done working the shift that I'm in? And it was like, well, you should be able to enter the information like ahead of time. So the first thing I did while I was in the meeting was I went to the HR website and then I tried to put in a time for the future clock in, and it was like, you can't do that. And then after the manager had finished talking, he was like, any more questions? I was like, question. I just went to the HR website and I tried to do my hours ahead of time, and it was like, you can't do that. He was like, we'll look into that. And I was like, our timesheets to do tomorrow. What do you want us to do? And I get it. Managers have a certain responsibility. They also want their jobs to be easy. I think they probably didn't want to stay after 5 confirming everybody's timesheet. They was just like, oh, I just want to get off at 5 too. I don't know if that's what their thought process was, but why else would you need people to submit their timesheets by 12 on a Friday, every Friday of every week of the month? So you can approve it, because the managers have to approve it, for it to go to like payroll. So I'm sorry, I went to talking too much. My whole thing is just like, I try to always remember, no matter where I go, and that's how I treat end users when people call in and they need passwords resets, or application is not working, or like I have to go into a server and restart something. I always remember that, like, at one point I was an end user. I didn't even, they don't know some people don't know how to boot a computer. Some people don't even know how to, like, get a program to work if there's an error that happens. That's why they're calling me. That's why they're trying to get the problem fixed. So sometimes I get frustrated because somebody will be like, my printer's not working. And I'm like, that's broad. I need specifics. And I try not to be like, okay, I'm frustrated. Because, like, you call me, but you know nothing, but you forget that they really don't know anything. So people in higher places, whenever I go up or I get in a better team or I'm doing better, when new people come in and they ask somebody to train, I'm interested in doing it because I knew what it was like to come into the company and feel like they weren't giving me enough information to know everything.
Right.
So I went on a tangent.
It's tough, man. No, it's tough. And here's the thing. Most managers, no matter how savvy they may be at a specific process, did not go to school to be managers. Most companies don't have sufficient management training to provide or to equip those people who are becoming managers to effectively lead a team. So they get lost in various responsibilities or duties that aren't necessarily important or that could potentially be delegated out to other individuals, and thus do not have conversations with their team appropriately at the right time and consistently, or able to provide a level of direction ahead of time. What you should do whenever you roll something out, right, is you have to also find out who else is going to be impacted. That's what change management's about. And that's why it's so vital for all of these companies to use in every single space is you have a change management program. All right, a change is going to happen. It must be communicated to change management. Mm-hmm. Change management then gets all the details of what's changing. And then you find out, okay, we have 15 different departments. How many of these departments, pull them all together and find out how many of those departments are going to be impacted by this change. Then once you have those answers, you can get everyone together to talk about those changes that want to be implemented, mm-hmm. how it's going to impact the system logic, or how it might impact in downstream processes. And then you come up with the solution. Then you have to have a small group to test that potential solution. Mm-hmm. And then you can start implementing those type of things with a widespread communication before you push somebody into something and testing something. And that's the appropriate way to handle processes or setting up new processes.
I mean, and I also understand that some things can slip through the cracks, like no matter how many managers you have, hopefully they try to cover everything. But again, we're human. It's not an excuse to be like, it's okay to mess up. Right. But I'm just saying, we're not computers that are programmed to do one task and we do it well. Mm-hmm. Even computers don't do certain tasks completely well without crashing. I mean, I'm not going to hold it anymore. I want to thank you for coming to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It was an experience because I never invited any of my family members to a podcast. And I was like, okay, Daryl is the most wisest. So it should go fairly smooth. But thank you for the podcast. Is there any final words that you might want to say or anything?
No, just thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. I'm proud of the work that you consistently do. Just keep it up. Keep challenging yourself, and that's the same for those out there who are listening. Keep challenging yourself. Keep questioning why you think the way you think. If your foundational principles that you refuse to let go of, whether it's that you have to protect, a specific person, or that you need to take care of someone, start to question why you think that way and how appropriate there is. And not just question them, but go out there and find other possibilities that exist, right? Learn from other people who have relationships with other people and see how their relationships are. See how they pack their clothes in a suitcase, right? So that you don't have to keep refolding your clothes. See how they do all the small details. And don't forget to change.
Well, thank you for coming, man. And we'll definitely have to do this again, brother.
Thanks, bro.
All right.